Hey crafty people, welcome back to my channel, and in case you're new here, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. I do paper crafting, card making, junk journaling, and mixed media art. Let's get crafting! So it's time for another technique time video, and as you can see I've got my splat box up because what I want to do is kind of a comparison of inking a background using sprays versus inking a background using ink pads. So I've filming this probably a couple weeks in advance of when it's going to go up because I had my splat box out and was making a mess. And having the splat box up is what gave me the idea to do this video. So I figured I might as well film it while I got the splat box up and I've got sprays out and I'm making a mess and all that good stuff. Now, a couple things you're going to want to have on hand for while you're playing. A spray bottle with some water in it. I've got this one, and I also have the Tim Holtz one, the Distress Sprayer, which will create bigger droplets. This does a fine mist, so it's great for doing an overall coating of water. I also have my little splatter brush. I got this from Simon Says Stamp. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll leave a link for it down below because we're going to do some splattering with some of the inks. I've got a little cup of water to help with wetting the brush, paper towels or paperless paper towels, cloths for cleanup, and some extra papers for doing your cleanup. I also will keep on hand a acrylic block that I can spray the inks that I want to splatter on to. And I do have a couple pipettes because a few of my mica stains are completely clogged up, like I can't get the sprayer to work, so I can use a pipette and stick it into the bottle and pull out just a little bit of the ink. So that's what I have on hand. For this comparison, I'm going to use Arteza watercolor pad, and they're 5.5 by 8.5 pieces, and they're 140 pounds or 300 GSM. And I got these and it's a cold press paper, and I got them on Amazon during their Prime days, so that's why I picked it up. Because if you're not new to my channel, you know I tend to use the Canson XL watercolor paper, and that'll work fine for this as well, or any other like heavy duty paper, because we're going to be using a lot of water that you want to use. Like, I know you can use mixed media paper, whatever you want. I'm just using the Arteza because for making inking backgrounds, I like using an economical paper. One of these days I'm going to do a comparison because I've got some of the Tim Holtz paper and I just picked up some scrapbook.com paper, and one of these days I'm going to do just a distress ink substrate paper comparison, but I have not gotten around to that yet. But one of these days it'll happen. But so I'm using the Arteza, and I like the Canson a little bit better because I don't have to deal with the side bit, but you can then ink up the side bit, and because it's perforated, so either you tear it off and then leave a whole ring of these, or you rip them out and then you tear them off later. I'm leaving them on so that I can ink them up as well and then use them as decorative pieces later on. So our first round, we're gonna do sprays, and we're gonna start with one piece of paper. I'm gonna pick a collection of sprays, but let me go over the different type of distress sprays you have. So you've got distress spray stain, which is like distress ink. It's a translucent or semi-translucent ink, and it's dye-based and it moves around great, and so it's the same as if I had pulled out my Villainous Potion Distress ink pad. Next up, we've got Distress Oxide spray, which is a dye and pigment ink fusion. So it's just like if I had pulled out a Distress Oxide ink pad. Then there are a couple specialty sprays options out there in the distress world, and one is the Distress Mica Stain. These are a seasonal product, and since we're in Halloween time, I know they, I think, released all of the Halloween colors again, and they're available not just in sets, but as open stock. And I'm guessing they're going to release the Christmas colors as well. So those are available probably now. So if you haven't gotten them before and are interested in them, they're available now. And then new this year, which is 2024, are the Distress Spritzes, which, so the mica stains are a combination of pigment and mica. So you've got color in the liquid and then the mica. Whereas the Distress Spritz is just the mica in a clear liquid. So it reacts and works a little bit differently from your mica spray stains. So those are our spray options in the world of Distress. So I am going to start by wetting this paper. And here's something to keep in mind when playing with Distress inks. I've said it before. Tim Holtz says it all the time, but in case you're new to them, wet on wet blends, wet on dry layers. So if I wet my paper, the colors I spray on it are going to blend together and kind of combine to create our background. So I'm going to get this nice and wetted down. And yeah, I've got some, I think the smootses are from my fingers because yeah, I've been playing for a little while now, so I'm all kinds of dirty. So let's go with, I'm going to pull out some black and some Black Soot, Villainous Potion, maybe some Hickory Smoke. I think I'm going to grab Pumice Stone. What are you? Your Hickory Smoke Oxide. So we're going to do a mixture of oxides and sprays, and I'm chattering away and my paper's drying. So now, the reason I have my oxides on their side is because, as you can hear, you need to mix them up because the pigment settles out from them. And this guy, clearly the lid's a mess on this one. And so I keep making a mess with it. Let's do some of that and some of this. And some of that. And then some Villainous Potion. I've got to see, I think I've got a purple oxide. Let me see what I have in a purple oxide. And I have some Wilted Violet, and so let's add a little bit of that, which will be a little bit brighter. Now, what I want to do is, since it got a little dry while I was looking for it, and letting the dogs out, I'm going to mist lightly from above and hit it with my heat tool. I'm going to come in and add a little bit more heavy water here to get it dripping down so that I have less white showing down at the edge there. And if you don't like how it's pooling, like down here at the edge, you can take a paper towel and come in and tap that off. And I'm going to do a little bit more water down on this edge and get that moving down. All right, so we've got like our first layer on here. And what I'm going to do is spray my mat. Go like this to break everything up and get little droplet shapes formed, and start tapping this in to the ink to add some more interest onto this piece. Now I'm going to dry. And I think I'm going to do a little bit more tapping. And dry. I'm going to grab another piece and do a bit of a cleanup on here to get this cleared off, and then we're going to do a couple more things with that piece and we'll be done with that one. Okay, so we've got a cleanup page and our original page, and I like them both. Sometimes I like the cleanup a little bit better than the original, although I do really like what I've got going on the original. Now, what I want to do is I want to come in with my splatter brush and do some splatters of water. So I'm just splattering on water at this point. I'm going to do a little over here, but this one's fairly light, so it's not going to have as much of an effect. And I'm going to give it a moment. And what I'm doing is I'm letting the water reactivate the ink. And then I'm going to take a paper towel and dry it off to take off the water. And it's going to leave splotchy bits behind. So it's just adding some more texture to the piece. Let's do it on this one. Like I said, it was going to be less noticeable on this one. You can also use the Distress Sprayer to get blobs. Like this area is really dark and this area is really dark, so I kind of want to get some more. Ooh. And the idea is if you pull the thing slowly, you get smaller drops. Or bigger drops, sorry. I tend to have some difficulty with the sprayer. So I'm going to give those, see, because you can see here, it's hopefully that it's reactivating the ink. And so I'm just going to come in, and actually I'm going to hit it a little bit with the, because if you partially dry it, it gets a little bit of a different effect if you let it partially dry it with like a heat gun and then tap it off. Over here in this area, you can see you get an interesting edge going on versus the other spots kind of thing. Now I do want to add a bit of shimmer to these guys, and I've got out from what I was doing before. This is Speciman. So what I want to do is I'm gonna wet my brush a little bit, and I'm gonna come in, because this is getting a little dry, it's been sitting here for a little bit. Give it a little bit of water just to loosen it up, so that what I can do is, and I'm gonna grab another brush to do it off of because my finger's starting to hurt. This one I'm trying to get some bigger spots, so I'm trying to get it a little wetter so that it comes off in bigger. And I also think I want to add a little bit of the Spritz in Wilted Violet, because that's going to have a slightly different effect. And again, I'm going to apply it with my little splatter brush instead of spritzing on, because I don't think it needs a ton. I think I want to have it more an accent. Although this one I think I might give a spritz to and see what we get. Now you're not going to see it yet. It's got to dry for it to show up. So I'm going to set this one aside and let it dry completely. This one I'm going to come over and actually spritz with the Spritz. And I was just pressing down slowly so I wasn't getting like a huge splatter of it. So let's set this one aside and see what we get, what it looks like when it's dry. And I'm gonna clean up the mess I got going on. All right, so I want to do another one, and I want to go greens this time. And so I'm gonna spritz the paper to get it wet. I am gonna grab some Twisted Citron Oxide. And then I've got Bubbling Cauldron and Wicked Elixir, which are the Halloween greens. And this time we're going to spray the micas on, so we're going to get more mica-y goodness. And now I feel like to balance that out we need a little bit of black soot, but I'm gonna use this to apply it so that I don't have it taking over, because this one seems to spray out way more than any of the others. And then a little Hickory Smoke as well. And again, I'm gonna do that because I want this to be primarily the greens with just a little gray and black added in for some interest. And I'm gonna spritz to get everybody moving around a little bit, since those blacks are kind of sitting there. And I'm probably gonna have to go deal with some dogs in a second because I kind of like the shape we've got going on over here. So let's try and get that to dry. Again, I'm gonna spray, run my fingers through, and tap. I feel like that corner needs some more going on. And I think I'm gonna grab some Decayed this time and maybe do a little Empty Tomb. And Empty Tomb's the one that's clogged. Just gonna put a little on here. Am I on screen? No. All right. So just using the unscrewed the thing to get some on there because this one's hopelessly clogged and I just need to replace it, which I think I bought replacement sprayers, but I don't know if I did, and if I did, where they are. We've got to do a hunt for those. All right. So we're just gonna add some drops of this. Again, let me grab this back over. Water on here so I hopefully can get some bigger drops. Ooh, that's a little bit bigger than I was looking for, but I think it'll still work out okay. So that one I'm gonna set aside and let it finish drying, and I think that one's done as well. And this one I think I'm just gonna do like a quick cleanup because there's not really enough on there to really get a good background going. So I'm just gonna use my paper towel. Okay, so we've finished doing the backgrounds using the sprays. So now we're gonna play with the ink pads. And to kind of keep our comparison as close as possible, I've got out the same colors. The only problem was I wasn't thinking about the fact that when I did the spray ones, I don't have any Pumice Stone ink pads. So there won't be any Pumice Stone on this one as there was with the sprayed purple one. But for my inks, I've got out Hickory Smoke in the Distress Ink and Oxide, Black Soot Distress Ink, Villainous Potion Distress Ink, and Wilted Violet Distress Oxide. And I did want to show you, it's one of those things I was reminded of watching the Tim Holtz tonic reveal with the new glass mat he has. The difference between putting your ink pads on a glass mat and putting it on like a silicone mat or a craft mat, because you'll get a different effect. And there are times when I like what I can get using a glass mat, so sometimes I'll pull it out and use it. Because here's what you need to keep in mind. When you put it on the glass mat, and sorry for the glare, I'm trying a new light setup, so the lighting might be different from the first part of this video. And I was also hoping it would be less glary with the glass mat, but not so much. I'm just gonna smush them all on here for our starting point. The inks on a glass mat are gonna blend together, whereas if you do it on a craft mat, it's gonna kind of stay where you put them. So I'll show you what that looks like. I'm just gonna add a little Villainous Potion in a couple other spots. And let's grab our little mister and give it, so you can see they're kind of all moving together. And then I'm gonna spritz my paper, which I kind of like for like a first layer, getting it kind of all blendy and not necessarily staying put in its separate little spots. And, you know, depending on what colors you use, you can potentially get muddy. And now I'm gonna hit this with my heat gun. So see, yeah, we've got a very blendy background going on, and I think I'm gonna do one more like application on here, and I'm gonna add a little bit more Villainous Potion because I want to bring some more darks in, and maybe a little Black Soot, and the Wilted Violet's a little, it's where the pinkiness is coming from, I think, so we'll just go with that. And since I didn't wet this, we're getting more layering than kind of like blending in together. So I'm going to dry this, and then we're going to move the glass mat out of the way. Okay, so now we're gonna put the inks on my silicone mat, and you'll see what I mean by the difference between a glass mat and a silicone or a craft mat. And don't forget, when you are putting ink down, you wanna push down on the pad to smush the ink on there. If you just tap it, you're not gonna get the ink you want on there, so you gotta give it a little oomph. So now that I've got that on there, when I spray it, you'll notice it's beading up, but it's not moving around a lot. And if I start dipping right now, we're gonna keep these hardline shapes. So I'm gonna go through and do this to kind of break things up and get them together. And then I'm gonna start tapping. All right, I think I've got enough going on with my darks. I want more purple in this background. So I'm gonna clean this mess up and just put some purple down and go from there. All right, I'm gonna go mostly just Villainous Potion this time. I may pull in a little bit of Hickory Smoke, but we're just gonna start with some Villainous Potion. Like, I just wanna get more purple on here. And I really want to get droplets, so I'm gonna kind of break up the edges so we don't get any like hard lines. And try and get some bigger droplets going. All right, I am going to let this dry for a moment, and then we're gonna come back and just add some water to it to change the look and get a little bit more interest and texture going on. All right, so I am gonna grab a little acrylic block and put some water on it and use my splatter brush. I'm gonna grab another one to tap it against. Now, what I want to do for some of these bigger ones is dry them for a sec. And then come in with a towel. Didn't have one handy, so we're just going with microfiber cloth. And we're lifting up the water, which should also lift up some of the ink. So yeah, let's show you what you get when you start drying it and then come in with a towel. So you can get some really interesting effects playing around with just water on these. And in fact, I think I'm gonna get a few more water splots, I think. And what it does is the water will reactivate the ink that's on there, and then you can lift the ink up, essentially. And you always want to give it a second to reactivate the ink before you bring your towel over. So now we got all kinds of interesting splotches on here. I am going to wet the back because that'll help flatten it out. Now I think I do want to add some of the specialty sprays to this, but I don't want to spray it on. So what I'm going to do is put it on my block and splatter with my splatter brush. And I actually already have out Ominous Twilight, so I'm going to use that. And it needs to get shaken up, and I did watch the Tim Holtz live where he used a little agitator, so I did pick one up for myself. I don't know, can you see it? No, it's not on screen because I'm zoomed in. Let's zoom back out. So I've got the little agitator. You just need to make sure your cap is on and everything's on nice and good, which I should probably double check that since I had the top off. And so that gets it all nice and mixed up because the mica settles to the bottom on these. So that's one of the things I bought recently. It's part of my birthday present month because I just thought it was so cool. And it wasn't very expensive, so it was one of those, okay, I'm gonna splurge for this because mixing up those bottles, especially the alcohol ink ones, can be a bit difficult. All right, I am gonna dry that. And actually I'm gonna set it aside and let it dry the rest of the way. I've got some cleanup sheets going that I'm gonna use the Ominous Twilight on just so that I don't waste the stuff that's on there. And then we'll come back and do the green one. All right, now for this one, I've pulled out my Tonic Studios craft mat. So you can see the difference between it and my silicone mat. And this has got a little bit of texture to it, which can sometimes, depending on how dry or wet the ink is, leave a bit of an impression on the paper. So this is our green one, and we're going to use Twisted Citron in Distress Oxide and ink and some black soot. And I'm going to start out with, because we're doing Twisted Citron, which is a light color, just the greens, and then we'll add in our black judiciously afterwards. I don't know how well the ink's showing up because there's some staining on this mat, and the greens are fairly light, but hopefully it'll show up once I spritz it with water and you can see it beading up. And again, I'm gonna just go like this and get the two mixed together and get some bigger droplets. And I'm gonna mist our paper. I'm gonna do it off to the side, just so I don't get more water on here. And we're gonna just set it down first time round. And because our paper's wet and our ink's all wet, it's gonna move around a fair bit on our paper, which is fine because I'm trying for a bit of a background. And I'm gonna add a little water to help move the ink around. Maybe do a little bit more down there. Like this spot, apparently I didn't get very wet because you'll notice the difference in how it's speckling versus blending together. But I think I'm okay with that. I'm gonna go ahead and hit this with my heat tool. And now that it's dry, I'm gonna get it back into the ink. For these few spots that are still wet, I'm gonna come in with my cloth and just get them dry the rest of the way, because that can lead to some interesting looks as well. I think I need to add some more ink to the mat. Got a couple of spots that are very ink deprived, so let's see if we can get some ink on those spots. Okay, right now I'm struggling really hard to resist the impulse to make sure all of the white is covered and trying to just leave some white space. I'm really bad about that. It's definitely something I struggle with. But what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna add some black soot. So I'm gonna just do, and I'm not cleaning up the mat, I'm just gonna leave it. We might pick up some more green as we go, which is fine. And I'm gonna try and spread it out a lot across the mat because it's so intense and I don't want a ton of black. So I'm just trying to push it around so it's spread out. Ooh. Now these dots of black are a little too intense for me. So what I'm gonna do is from high up, spritz with my water bottle, which will get that black to kind of move a little bit. And so be less intense, spotty, like the spottiness will disperse. But see, I mentioned the texture from the mat. Let's show you. In this area here, that patterning is texture from the mat. I'm gonna, I think, spray a little bit more water off to the side and grab my brush and just come in and add some more water in some spots, more focused, to get some of that black. Because yeah, spreading it out made me get lots of little teeny tiny spots that don't know that I love. So we're gonna dry this. Then what I'm gonna do is, I think we're gonna, oddly enough, add a little bit more black, but do it without spreading it out so much. Like, I'm trying to get big droplets, so I'm adding a whole bunch of water. And we're just gonna go back in some of these spots that's a little too teeny tiny spotsy and see what we can get. All right, I'm gonna set this aside for a minute, let it dry the rest of the way, have a bit of a cleanup, because I think next step is to add some more green back in and see what we get. All right, so we're gonna add some more of the Twisted Citron on there. All right, before I clean up, what I want to do is do some water splatters on it. So I'm gonna put some water off to the side here, grab my splatter brush, and just kind of splatter some water. I think lifting tends to work a little bit better with a paper towel than with this cloth, especially since this cloth is on the damper side. I think I'm gonna pull out some mica stain and add a little splatter of that on there and see if that gets it a little bit more where I want it to be. And I'm gonna clean this mess up as well. So I'll be right back. All right, so I've grabbed Distress Mica Stain in Holly Branch and Specimen. Didn't realize it was Holly Branch I was grabbing. So let's go ahead and do these guys. And I'm just gonna add a little water, grab my splat brush, now for some of these I don't want to leave them so intense, so I'm gonna grab a little bottle with water and put like a drop of water on some of them. Kind of get those guys moving around a little bit. Kind of playing around. And I'm holding it up so that gravity can just pull it down. See how well you can see. I've got it just running down. Let's get a little more over here. There we go. So yeah, don't be afraid to play around with your inks. You bought them to use them. And they're not doing anybody any good sitting on a shelf. All right, let's come in and dry this. Okay, I'm gonna clean that up, and I'm actually gonna use it on my cleanup sheet, which I think I like better. So I think I'm gonna add a little bit more of the holly branch. And a little bit more water, just because you get bigger drops if you've got more wet on the brush. Do that and dry it. And then you can always put your sprays out on the mat. And let's go like that. And I'm gonna put the rest on this one. All right, I'm gonna take a second to have a bit of a cleanup, and then we'll come back and take a look at what we did. Okay, so here are our results. These were the ones we did using the sprays, and one of the good things with the sprays is you can get a lot of coverage really quick. And so if I'm trying to get full coverage really quick, I tend to pull out my sprays, but I don't love the fact that I have to pull up the splatter box or spray gets everywhere and then it's a bit on the messy side, which is why I don't tend to use them as often as I do my inks. Like I tend to, if I'm going to ink a background, I tend to go this route more often than I do this route, just because I don't like the mess I get with the sprays. So that's the one I did on camera, and then this is the cleanup sheet from that. And then here's our green. Again, it gets you a lot of coverage really quickly. So if that's what you're going for, you'll want to get sprays. And then that's the cleanup. If you are concerned budget-wise, I recommend the inks, just because you can then stamp with the inks as well. Not so you can stamp with the sprays, but it's a little bit more effort because you got to spray it out and tap, and it's a bit messy. It can be done, but it's not the easiest way to stamp. So your distress inks and distress oxides get you more bang for your buck because you can do that. You can also ink blend with your ink pads. So if you are new to the world of distress and are trying to decide between getting sprays or ink pads or oxides, I would recommend ink pads over sprays. Unless all you want to do is spray backgrounds like this, then go for the sprays. But as I said, I have a bunch of the sprays. I don't use them as often. I'm trying to be better about that since I have them. But I don't like the fact that I have to pull up my splat box to keep the sprays from going everywhere. And I'm an old school distress ink pad girl. So these are the ones we did with the ink pads. And so I got these two cleanup sheets from doing that. And then this is the one. It's growing on me. I don't quite love it yet, but I can always cut it apart, die cut it to disguise some of it, you know, and I might like it better that way. And I really like how the cleanup sheet came out. Cleanup sheet came out great. So I also highly recommend, if you're having a play with your inks, which I strongly urge you to play with your inks, it's always a lot of fun and you get lovely backgrounds. Keep some spare pieces of paper around so that you can clean up when you're done with what you've got going on your mat. Clean that up and have 3 for the price of 1. So again, you can get similar results. It just takes a little bit more effort if you're using the ink pads to get like the full coverage that you see on these guys. And I'm trying to be better about leaving some white space. So that's why I didn't keep going at this until it was completely covered. but I could have, and I have in the past. And the blendiness on the glass mat is really good for getting a full, as much coverage as possible on the base. But when you want the splotchy bits and all of this sort of stuff going on, that's when you're going to want to use a craft mat or a silicone mat, because it beads up and stays in place, whereas on the glass mat it kind of all blends together. So those are my tips and thoughts on sprays versus ink pads. And that's all for today. So if you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting.